And good evening, good afternoon, good morning to wherever you're watching or listening to us from all over the Philippines and from all over the world. And welcome to my podcast, the RJ Ledesma podcast. In my podcast, I interview the country's pioneering business personalities and entrepreneurs to learn more about how they think about business. What are their success secrets? Can we share? Can we also learn how to make those success secrets successful for us as well? How have they pivoted? How have they innovated their businesses during this pandemic? But more importantly, what opportunities do they see emerging in this new or this now normal? Now, is there a business personality or entrepreneur that you would like me to interview here on the podcast? Please let me know. I would love to learn from them. Just drop me a message. We are live right now on Kumu, CBRC TV, Global Pinas TV, and the Bounce Back Network. If you've been enjoying my podcast so far and you are learning a lot from it, please do me a favor. Please subscribe and invite more friends to listen to the RJ Ledesma podcast on Spotify, on Google, and Apple. And you can also catch us on YouTube. And before we start with our podcast, here's a quick shout out to our good friends from Vessel. Vessel PH can help you future-proof your business by boosting your digital presence and making sure that you can attract more customers and more sales. If you want to learn more about them, just click on the link in my description. Tonight, I've got a great guest. We were just together in the CEO Summit in Baguio this week. A lot of great learning and insights coming from him because his business is not just a startup, it's actually an advocacy. We've got Sparky Perreras, who's a CEO and co-founder of PearlPay. PearlPay is an end-to-end digital banking solutions provider that empowers rural banks in the Philippines with digital transformation. The company has been trying to gradually or at least accelerate digital infrastructure here in the Philippines so that they can support the transformation efforts of community-based financial institutions. If you check out their website, you will see that they're helping rural banks, microfinancing institutions, cooperatives, and other similar institutions so that they can serve and reach more of our underserved and unbanked Filipinos. With that, please welcome to the show my friend Sparky Perreras. Sparky, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me, RJ. Really appreciate it.
No, I'm so glad that we're here talking together. You know, it was quite an opportunity for us to see each other in the CEO Summit in Baguio. And a shout out lang to Jello Valdez, who put together a really great summit. Great weather, great food, great company, and of course, people like yourself. And just last Tuesday, I had James of Servicoin, Dongla, here on the show. both of you guys really great advocates for finance here in the Philippines, or for inclusive financial uh, business here in the Philippines. Now, Spark, one of the big things, and we're saying this belatedly to congratulate you, but something big happened to Pearl Pay last year. You won actually an international competition. Tell us more about that.
Correct. So actually, in the words of the the Visa startup coach for teaching, this is the first time for a Filipino fintech company to represent Asia Pacific. So across 5 regions, Asia Pacific, Latin America, the U.S., North America, and then other regions, the Sub-Saharan region. This is the first time that a Filipino fintech company, was able to represent the Asia Pacific region. And Asia Pacific, according, in the words of the Visa, when you talk about Asia Pacific, top 3 countries in mind would be China, Singapore, and India. I mean,
Oh.
Philippines and Indonesia. And it's nice to have. It's really surprising to see that a fintech company from the Philippines was able to represent the Asia Pacific region.
Well, so it's a really a big deal. And can you tell us a bit more? What is it? It's called. It was the Visa Mastercard Everywhere Initiative. Is that right? That's a global competition. And tell us a bit
Yes,
more
it's
about
a
why this competition is so relevant, especially for us to win it here in the Philippines.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the Visa Everywhere initiative. It's a global competition across 5 regions, and the regional winner for each region was able to compete, at the world stage last September 15th. And yeah, and these are the startups, the next generation startups that has huge potential in terms of
Mhm.
social impact for doing digital finance. So yeah, I think we were lucky to represent the Asia Pacific, and of course, to be proud to represent our beloved country, RJ.
I love that. So I think the key thing over here is that it's not just it's not the startup itself, but the social impact that it has on the country, and hopefully something that can scale to other countries as well. Just a question for you. I understand that in the past 5 years they've gone through over 8,500 startups. They've raised about 2.5 billion in funding for the startups which have gone through the Visa Everywhere initiative. Were you able to get or secure some funding or investment as a result of participating in the Visa Everywhere initiative competition?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, we successfully raised in our pre-series A round. Now we
Wow.
are prepping up ourselves for the series A round. So we're just hitting the right target, hitting the right metrics. But definitely, it's going to be this year for our series A round, RJ.
Fantastic. And I hope you don't mind taking a step back, Spark, because there are people here listening who are involved in the startup world, but there are also people over here who are hearing some words for the first time. So if you don't mind, can you try to, if you can, and you break it down for the people listening, what do you mean by pre-series A and series A funding, especially when we're talking about
Uh,
startups?
all right. Okay. So for for in the startup industry, in the startup world, uh, we have a series of stage in terms of investment round. So first is the seed round, which normally being taken care of by the friends, families of the founders, and then the pre-series A round is it's we are able to find an angel investor to finance to build the product, to build the product. And then for the Series A round, this is now it will now be utilized for scale ups, to support and fuel the growth of the startup company. So at least in our pre-series A round, we are able to raise enough capital to build the product for Pearl.
Wow, fantastic. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up over here was that you told me that you actually had a startup coach, right? Or people coaching you. I hope you don't mind, before we get into discussing more about Pearl Pay, what did you pick up from the startup coach that you can also share to potential startups or potential businesses who are listening to us here right now?
Yeah, that's okay. So in my case, shout out to Jojo Flores of Plug and Play. Is one of our startup coach for whenever we need to decide, big decision. But in the startup, so there are various ways. So when we are competing, there are startup pitch coach. So they will be helping you to refine the message, the pitch presentation, so those are the things, at least in a startup competition. But in the in general, by and large, a startup coach would be, plug and play Jojo Flores, who have helped us actually in terms of making the right decision along the way because it's so hard. It's so tough actually, facing the big decisions that we need to make because it could make or break the company.
If you don't mind, can you share some of these examples that Georgia Flores was
Sure.
actually a guest here a couple of months ago, and we
Yeah,
had great
I watched
insights.
it.
Oh, so I
Yes,
guess
yes.
I'm preaching to the converted over here, but what can you share people as well in terms of what 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 did he teach you that he was able to distill from all the startups he was learning from and gaining info from in Silicon Valley?
Okay, so this was in 2019, last quarter of 2019. Then we participated the Rise startup event in Hong Kong, sponsored by the Philippine government. So we went there, we met some investors, and then before the our trip ends, one of the top fintech company in Hong Kong, approached us and offered us a term sheet, a 60% acquisition. So,
Wow.
and at that time, this was 2019. This was 2019. We don't have even a working product yet. What we have are the founding teams, and we have so what we have is a strong team, but we don't have a working product yet. So we asked Jojo Flores, hey, you know what? We are being acquired 60%. Here's the term sheet. It's a multi-million dollar deal. What do you think? It's too early. It's too early for to get acquired and to lose control of the company, yeah, right? At 60%, you're basically giving away the company.
Mhm.
So we follow this advice actually. It's in his own words. We consider that as a predatory deal at this early stage, right? So we are able to raise funds, and fortunately for us, enough for us to qualify for Plug and Play Indonesia. So we have operations in Indonesia through the help of Jojo Flores and Plug and Play. So that's one thing, and the other one, I could still remember whenever I had a chance to discuss with venture capital, capitalist, venture partner, I normally ask them, share at least our current challenges. And I still remember when we finished the investment or the business plan, version 1.0 of Pearl Pay in 2019, we are primarily focused on the e-wallet technology. So
Mhm.
we believe this will revolutionize the rural banks, right? And when we went to the ground, we learned that it's not the top priority of the rural banks of our target market. It's actually the core banking, replacing their legacy infrastructure. So
Oh.
at that point in time, we now have a product market fit. We don't have a product market fit because our product, doesn't,
Doesn't fit the
our
market.
target exactly. And so there was a venture partner. I asked, hey, you know what? There's we're facing we don't have the product market fit, and what do you think we should do? And then he you know what? Whoever holds the core banking solution actually wins because basically it holds all the data. The checking account, the savings account, the bank deposits, the loan accounts, right? And then you're just one step away to offer adjacent products and services. And then I told him, with the very limited resources that we have the founding team and a handful of software engineers, but it will dilute our efforts. Our we will be spreading ourselves too thin. That's my response to the venture partner. And then he told, that's the kind of decisions you have to make as an entrepreneur. So it's really up to you whether it's going to break or make your company. And so what I did, whenever when in doubt, go back to the customer journey. So we reach out to the rural banks, and then just to give them a heads up that we are planning and studying to shift our focus to the core banking, and then all of a sudden we started to gain traction. But it's not overnight, right? It's not overnight. But I think we made the right decision to shift our focus this is pre-COVID, by the way, pre-COVID, pre-pandemic. So, the rural banks are their primary channel in terms of providing financial services is still over the counter, through branch network. So, but with COVID-19 in place, it changed the landscape. Changed the landscape, and it allows our target market to embrace digital or mobile banking channel. So yeah.
So this pandemic was actually a boon to your business, not a bane to Pearl Pay.
Yes, yes, we were. I think we were lucky. As a company, we were lucky to be in an industry where digital transformation is. I mean, we don't have to sell. We don't have to educate. The COVID-19 is a strong catalyst for digital transformation. So yeah, there's a strong demand for the services that we are offering to the rural banks and cooperative banks.
Okay, thanks so much, Spark. We kind of went on a roundabout discussion, but I think it was very informative to go through that process because many startups encounter that same sort of issue, and you really, I think, helped all of them out in terms of the clarity of thinking moving ahead. Now, with that, no, you did say that you were done pitching in front of Visa, in front of a lot of venture capitalists in the global finals. Maybe you could give us a little sample of what you were doing. How do you pitch right now? What was your elevator pitch, or rather, what was just your pitch in front of the people in Visa for Pearl Pay, so we get to understand it a bit better?
Yeah. So this is I think by and large there is a standard flow of pitching. First is to define the problem. And what kind of problem is it worth solving the problem? What kind of opportunity? Because problem translates to opportunity. So how big is the market from Philippine standpoint, and then regional standpoint, and then global at the global perspective. So yeah, and of course we are being assisted by and guided by the startup Visa coach, helping us to refine our pitch. But in principle, in essence, those are the information needed to convey and communicate well with the audience. Because
Yeah,
we only have less than 3 minutes actually
I
to
know
do the
exactly.
pitch.
So, what's your pitch right now? Can you explain to people? Can you give us a sample of your pitch right now? Of how
Sure.
do you pitch Pearl Pay? Yeah.
Okay, so well, our products and services is very simple. Pearl Pay premise. So this is a passbook, right? So this is passbook. We help rural banks, thousands of rural banks in Southeast Asia to go digital. So that's actually what we do, helping them to go digital from passbook banking to digital banking. So in principle, that's what we do.
Okay. Wow, that was a quick pitch, huh? Now I get what you do now. It's basically you're helping digitize the rural banks, right? You're helping them
Correct.
digitize a lot of the things that so that at least I mean the it's sort of like what I recall right now is that they used to say that Ayana of Jojo Perez, right? The biggest
Yes.
remittance was not from another country to the Philippines, but from urban to rural. And it sort of
Correct.
mirrors what you have also in terms of the concern over here. The biggest concern is not necessarily from doing business from the big bank to an international bank, but rather from our rural banks to sort of like our big banks. Is that sort of like a correct analogy to make? That's where the real sort of like that's where the business lies, parang ganyan.
Actually, that's one of the that would be one of the consequences. Helping the rural banks go digital. Under exponential organization from digitization to democratization. Once data becomes digitized, bits of zero and one, it's very easy to transfer information and data, right? So, and right now, this passbook, I mean, the way for me to do some transaction is I need to visit the physical branch and fill up a deposit or withdrawal slip, and it's
So
it's
that,
it's
that, that,
it's so
that because especially and just to clarify, this is really for the rural bank. Kailangan mo ng passbook. You have to go there with a passbook mismo. Oo.
correct, because majority of them, they don't have ATMs, no debit, no credit cards, no digital banking, no mobile banking in place. So what we're providing to the rural banks is adding those channels, right? To allow, so instead of me, for example, this is an actual passbook. So instead of me going to the physical branch, all I need to do is download the app, and then make bills payment, uh, invest in crypto, right? Those are even invest in stocks eventually, right? So those are the things that giving them options to move their funds uh, at their convenience, very conveniently. So yeah, that's those are, I think, consequences, and there are a lot of opportunities once data has been digitized.
Got that, got that. So I want to step back because right now there's so many questions I have with regard, especially to the opportunities. But what I want to take the listeners through right now is the journey towards discovering the problem that you encountered and how you were able to address that. So let's take a step back, Sparky. Because it's a this is really a financial inclusion product or a fintech product. So my presumption is that you were a banker in your previous life before entering into technology. So take us through that, and then how,
Sure.
if you were a banker, how did you come across this problem?
Okay, that's a great question. So I used to work in the one of the top banks for over a decade, uh, and in 2012, my flagship project on that bank, I led the EMV chip card migration. So this is the central bank issued a circular memo mandating all financial institutions that are currently using magnetic stripe cards to migrate to a much secured EMV chip card. So 2012, I led the EMV chip card for Mastercard and Visa
And sorry,
for
and
the
your
credit
background was
card
that,
portfolio.
were you a banker by profession, or were you an IT guy
Yes,
by profession doing banking?
and an IT guy works in the bank. Yes.
Okay, got that.
So
Oh, okay.
so I led the EMV chip card migration. So we have work blocks. I'm leading I led the technology work block, but there are operation, communications, risk management, fraud. But since this is more of a technology driven, so they decide all of the work blocks decided, what, let's allow Spark to take the lead for this initiative. So, uh, and of course, leading the project, I was exposed to how expensive the proprietary technology, tens of millions of US dollars just to migrate, right? And to use this proprietary technology. I think, self-consciousness, I developed this self-consciousness that how many banks do we have in the Philippines that that has a multi-million dollar financial capacity to invest in such a
Mhm.
proprietary technology. And from one question, it led from one thing to another. And before I knew it, I was really, okay. So this is how many banks we have. I mean, we have 400 rural banks in the Philippines, not branch network, but individual banking institutions under
Oh,
rural bank. And
how many again? How many again? Did you say
400
400
rural banks.
rural banks? And many of these
Yeah,
rural banks are very, for the lack of a better term, they're very manual. Is that right? In many of their processes.
correct. So this is a passbook. As of today, there are more than 15 million passbook holders under rural banks alone, and majority of them they don't have ATMs. They are trapped on this one, and it's an opportunity loss because in the banking industry, or at least in the payment industry, every time you use your Mastercard or Visa card issued by any other commercial bank, the commercial bank earns an average of 1.14%, right? And this passbook, all I have to do is basically withdraw funds, and the banks are not earning. The rural banks are not they're not participating in the digital payment economy. So what we are providing is that we help these rural banks, cooperative financial institutions to go digital, and then allow them to participate and even thrive in the digital payment economy. So we share those interchange revenue with our partner rural banks and cooperative financial institutions. So yeah, it started 2012, and then fast forward 2015. I could still remember. I asked one of my mentors, one of the vice presidents of that bank, hey, you know what? I was being poached, locally and international. What do you think should I do? Should I accept this? And then he mentioned a handful of things. First, I mean, if you will go to Middle East, because there was an offer in Dubai back then, uh, you know, number one, culture. and then you have a family, and you need to uproot your family and then migrate in Dubai. Second, you'll be part of the 6,000 overseas Filipino workers who leave the Philippines on a daily basis, right? So rather than with your skills and talent, rather than spend it or use it outside the Philippines, why don't you set up your own IT company here in the Philippines? And 1 month after I tendered my resignation, all of my colleagues said, you're crazy. You're crazy, smart. No, but I think in my mind back then is that if I won't do this, if at least try, if I won't try this, I think I'm going to regret it. When when I get old. So yeah, so 2015. So Prete is now my third startup, and yeah, I'm here for the long haul for
So
for
wait,
for Prete.
Perpay has been your third startup, is that right?
Yes,
Wow,
yes,
so
correct.
what quite a journey if I think about it. And I just want to go to the sort of like the mindset of many people who might be in your position right now, Spark. Na parang, you know, you left a steady paying job to pursue entrepreneurship. Many people wouldn't do that one. What's your advice for people at that sort of stage? How should they be prepared, I guess, not just mentally and emotionally, but also, I guess, financially as well when they make that sort of jump? Because, I mean, I'm sure all those things were part of your consideration, right? When you were doing this
Yes,
one.
correct, correct. So at least I was able to save, and then before it, I think I think I was lucky because 2000, I'm an IT guy, so who works in the bank, and I love reading books. So whenever whenever I'm curious about something, I will read books about that topic. And from one, I think I could still remember just one day. I mean, how does stock exchange work, right? How does stock? So I read books about One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch, the best mutual fund manager from Fidelity. So I think it's the Bible of stock investors and stock pickers and traders. So I was actively investing in stock exchange back in 2006 and until
Locally,
2008. Locally, Philippine
locally.
stock exchange. So yeah, and yeah, actually, I made following the guide provided by the book. Actually, how to read the financial statement, etc. How to look for understanding the price to earning ratio. How to so basically, I'm a value investor, right? So I'm looking for undervalued stocks, then invest, and then wait for the market correction. So I was able to save and invest and give me enough runway, to become an entrepreneur. So yeah, it's not an overnight thing. So I spent over a decade in the banking industry as an IT, and yeah, and then for about 3 years I was actively investing at the Philippine Stock Exchange,
Wow.
and yeah, that's
Really, really great,
that's
really great. Really great story. And then when you jumped ship and went the entrepreneurial route, this is the interesting thing that you had two other startups before you
yes.
went into that one. And we often tell people, don't fall in love with your first startup because it might not be your best startup. Tell us a bit more about your experience there. Did it quote unquote fail? Because there's no real failure over here. It's just that it was a learning process, right? And then you get
Yes,
fulfilled.
correct, correct.
Tell us a bit more about
So
those two other startups that you were doing.
yeah, so okay, so on the first startup, it was acquired by a Japanese venture company and who has a Filipino partner. So they're still operating. They're still operating. So it started as a consulting company for EMV. So we made some partnership with actually top Japanese, more than 100-year-old Japanese company. So for producing chip cards and card production. But I started it in 2015, and then about less than 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, less than 6 months, we sold it. We sold it. But it's enough for us to exit initially, and then form another startup where I failed miserably.
Why did you sell it? Was there a reason why you weren't your heart wasn't into it? I mean, what's the reason for you to sell it at such an early stage?
That's a good question. So I think any other startups, one fundamental challenge is fundraising. So we were trying to raise funds, and unfortunately for us, we got some commitment, but all of a sudden back out. And we
Okay.
hired already some people because of that commitment.
Uh,
And of course, to stop the bleeding, it's either it's hard to tell to people that you recently hired and then, fire them as well. So rather than shutting it down, we find, luckily for us, we are able to find who wants to invest and acquire 100%. So that is the main reason for that one. So we solved it. We solved it. And then the second startup, actually, I failed miserably on the second startup. It actually failed, and but I think that's life goes on. Pick up pick up where I left off, and started a new one. And this one, since 2019, up to this point in time, we're still operating and growing with 52 full-time employees. Uh, so yeah, I think we're really growing strong.
well, I want to go. I feel might into the second startup where you failed miserably. Can you tell us a bit more about that one? Because the failed miserably sometimes is a great story to tell, right? What was the insight for that? What's the pain point that you were trying to solve for that second startup?
Yeah. Okay. So number one, as a dev shop, we started it as a dev shop. We're developing application on behalf of corporations, clients. We are able to close some deals actually with some of the big banks. With some of the big banks, with some application, SMS to be exact. And I think I think finding the right founding partner is really really important
Yes, I
because there
agree.
will come
I
to a,
agree so much.
yeah,
I agree so much.
and this is where the I think integrity matters. Integrity matters, and yeah, I decided this is not the group of people that I want to spend with for the rest of my life. So I think philosophical differences. So I left, I resigned, I left, and then found this new startup, which is my third startup, really.
Which is this one over here. One last question. I hope you don't mind because it's very instructive for me. How do people know? And I've had my share of having partners which I liked working with, and that I'm not I'm not too keen to work with anymore. And sometimes how can you tell? Uh, are there red flags that you can tell, or that some partnerships won't work out, or some founding partners won't work out, or it's really something that you have to go through to experience before you can tell?
Yeah, I think in my case, it's a trial and error. But this one actually came from our good friend Bren when he first invested in our startup. Um, and I pick up this from his group. Spark, one of our criteria, his group of friends, one of our criteria for investing in startup or company like yours is that of course fundamentals, the team it should be there, the opportunities, right, the unit economics it should be there, but most importantly, is this person, is this something that I can, I want to spend, my life with, or something that I would like to grow old with. That was the term used by this group of people. And for me, wow, I think that is something, just ask this question. Is this person something I want to grow old with? If the if they ask, if
Parang
you
parang asawa, di
hesitated.
ba? It's like you're parang inaasawa mo rin yung tao niya. It's like you're getting married to the
Correct.
person.
Correct, right? If you don't see yourself, spending, weekends with this person, then probably it's not a good, idea to start with. So from there on, I'm using that. Is this person or this new partner is something I want to grow old with, right? Or this new co-founder is something I want to grow old with. So that's now part of the equation. And if I stuttered or if I hesitated, then it now become an indicator, right? Becomes an indicator for me, right? So that would be a red flag if ever I hesitated. So yeah.
Okay. Now, finally, moving on to Pearl Pay. Now, I want to figure out, how did you start determining what you said you were in the finance industry, but how did you start determining what was the pain point that led to the creation of the first iteration of Pearl Pay?
Yeah, okay. So initially, this is the landscape: 400 rural banks, actually 24,000 community-based financial institutions in the Philippines. That includes cooperatives, credits, and since in the digital payment industry, we have this unit economics which is called interchange revenue. So, as an issuer, every time you use your card, on Visa, MasterCard, you earn 1.14%. And it's an opportunity loss for the rural banks simply because they don't have the right technology in place. They are trapped using this paper-based passbook technology, and it's an opportunity loss for them not to generate those non-interest based revenue activities, which is payments. So and it's a big opportunity. It's a great opportunity because if you compared us with other e-wallet issuers, for example, one of the fundamental challenges of an e-money issuer, similar to GCash, PayMaya, Shopee Pay, Lazada Pay, is that customer acquisition costs, right? You know, normally, normally, you have to spend multi-million dollars just to acquire new customers. And in our case, we don't want to compete head on. So we need to be smart. So we're simply tapping the existing infrastructure. So I think that's the biggest opportunity here is that by simply tapping the existing infrastructure of these rural banks. As aforementioned, there are 15 million passbook holders by the rural banks, right? And working closely with rural banks, helping them to go digital, it's already ready and available market as sort of users to generate volumes of transaction. Second, fundamental challenges of any e-money issuer or any fintech company would be activation. So I could still remember when at the early stage of e-money issuers, GCash, PayMaya before, whenever you top up 100 peso, you get a free burger, from
Oh,
one of the fast food. And of course, somebody has to pay for it, right? And just to do top up. In our case, uh, we don't have to, we're not really required to run that kind of program because 35%, 35% of the loan portfolio of across the banks in the Philippines are salary loans, right? And the rural banks, they also offer salary loans. And salary loans, the way it's being disbursed is that they will send an SMS message. Congratulations, Mr. Sparky Perreras, your salary loan has been approved for 10,000 pesos. You can visit our branch from Monday to Friday, right? And then disburse the funds cash, right? So instead of, here's an alternative. Instead of disbursing the loan proceeds over the counter, um, the moment they go, the moment now they have a mobile wallet or a mobile banking, the rural banks now has the option, and even the consumer, the loan applicant, has the option to receive the loan proceeds instead of by a branch, can receive it through the wallet. So that's a
mhm.
form of activation, right? So it's a pre-fund, it's a pre-fund. And here's the good part. When a rural bank disburses cash over the counter, and the loan, the loan customer use it to pay for tuition fee, to pay for bills, the banks are not earning anything at all, right? But if they use it through the digital payment, as aforementioned, there is a unit economics called interchange revenue, which allows them to generate revenue, average of 1.14%. Then we can share the revenue with
Okay.
between 30 and 40 rural banks. So that's without really spending that much. And in our case, competition, it's a common thing now across startups, even conglomerates, is that the North Star metric of the e-money issuers, and GCash and PayMaya, for example, is that GTV, gross transaction volume or gross transaction value. So in our case, we're not really eating any existing market space. because what we're really doing is we are expanding the market space by allowing these rural banks to, eventually send money across GCash and Paymaya. And, it's going to be a win-win for across all entities, no? So yeah, that's what we are envisioning for PearlPay and for our partner rural banks and community-based financial institutions.
So the way to understand it, so that if I was to laymanize it, and as my dad asked me, oh, saan kumikita ng pera? Where does PearlPay make money? If my understanding is correct, you make money basically on the transaction revenue, because as you upgrade them from a manual from a legacy system, from the usual to a more digitized system, they're able to capture more transactions, and you capture more of those transactions. In the transaction fee that you're charged, you make PearlPay makes money for every transaction that is done. Is that correct?
Correct, correct. So that's our main revenue stream. The other one is we also charge monthly recurring fee for the software as a service for the cloud-based core banking solution and the loan management solution. So right now, actually, we are I think we, in terms of competition, 15 times better compared to our nearest competitor on the cloud-based core banking solution. Because in our, in the cloud banking, core banking space, especially the enterprise software, because we are an enterprise, SaaS, software as a service, is that you develop a product, and the conventional or the traditional way of doing things is that you charge your customer a hefty license fee. And this is the main problem why the rural banks and community-based financial institutions are still trapped using this passbook technology, because the digital technology for core bank, it's so expensive. So, and it's understandably why, because it requires a big capital to develop a product, to develop especially a core banking system that needs to comply with the central bank regulations. So in our case, we need to be innovative in terms of to set a price point where no rural banks and community-based financial institutions will be left behind. But, come up with a business model that will allow us to be sustainable and profitable at the same time. So that's where the adjacent products and services for the payment gateway, for the transactions, allow them to convert those over-the-counter cash transactions in a form of digital payments, and then capture that digital payment and share it together with the partner rural banks and community-based financial institutions. So in essence, that's actually what we do. We have monthly recurring fee, but majority would be revenue would be coming from the transactions, GTV.
Got that. So that's basically the model over there, and so people can better appreciate that one. But to get there, you were saying that there was an initial no product market fit. How did you move from there to the current product that you have?
Yeah, that's okay. So this is remember. So there was a venture partner, who I told him, you know what, our challenge. We recognize already that we don't have a product market fit, and what we need to do. We also know that what we need to do is to transition from an e-wallet product focus to core banking product focus. But what we don't have is resources, to execute, because it will definitely spread ourselves too thin.
Mm-hmm.
And the response of what, it's that is the kind of decision that you have to make as an entrepreneur. And but changing the perspective, I can still remember this one. So it just so happened that the former president, RBOP president, the Rural Bankers Association of the Philippines president at the time, was a good friend. So I gave him a call. I gave him a call just to validate, whether transitioning from an e-wallet to core banking would allow us to have a product market fit. So the question is this: hey, you know what? We are studying to offer a cloud-based core banking solution that will be really affordable. And his response is classic. You know what, Spark? If you do this, If you do that, you will solve my problem as a president, and you will solve the entire problem of the industry. And I think, okay. So I told him, okay. After that call, I sent a chat message to our group, to the founding team. I sent a message to the co-founder, PO, CTO, and NAP, the Chief Innovation InfoSec Officer. And I told them, you know what? The moment we offer this core banking, let's by simply change instead of developing it from scratch. The message that I sent was, let's find an off-the-shelf core banking solution that's something that we can white label. So, by simply changing the perspective and changing the set of line of questions, and on the same night, it was Pio who was able to find a great open source core banking. And of course, we still need to comply it with the BSP regulatory framework. And it's not easy, it's not overnight, but at least it allows us to have a working product, that we don't have to spend or build it from scratch. And that's I think perspective matters, right? Perspective matters. Asking the right question. So in that case, it saves us time and effort, and we white label. It's an open source anyway. It's an open source product. But the biggest challenge is actually to make it comply with BSP. It took us actually almost a year to make it
Wow.
fully compliant with BSP. Yeah.
Wow. And then you were talking about that what you're helping to do is at the same time, no, you're talking about there's a lot of unbanked here in the Philippines because we're okay. Technically, rural banks, we see how you're helping out by helping. You're helping the rural banks, and you're also helping people. You're also helping people who are. You're helping the rural banks make more money through the transactions, but through digitizing, you're also helping it ease the smoothness of people transacting with the bank. But how are you also helping? What's the opportunity now that Pearl Pay is doing for the unbanked, the larger unbanked
Good
population?
question. Yeah, good question. And this is our, in our minds, in our view, this is how we view the financial inclusion challenges, to make the unbanked, bankable. So by helping the rural banks, the community-based financial institutions, I could still remember if once data becomes digitized, right? Once a rural bank has been there's an additional channel of digital, a mobile banking channel. They can do more and they can reach more people because before, we have more than 1,500 municipalities. Half of that, one third, 500, around 500 municipalities doesn't have a physical branch banking network, right?
Mm-hmm.
500 municipalities. Now, instead of setting up a branch banking network in those 500 municipalities, a rural bank that now has a digital or a mobile banking channel can now start accepting, opening bank accounts through online, right? So through on instead of me traveling and visiting a branch, I can simply download an app and then sign up for a loan, sign up for a savings account and a checking account. And right now, that's what we're seeing, right? Because there's no digital touch point for these hundreds of rural banks and thousands of cooperatives, community-based financial institutions, and microfinance organizations, simply because they don't have the digital channel in place, right? The digital banking channel in place. So in our view, once we help, and this is, it aligns well with organization, Singularity, from digitize to democratize, right? So that is the form of exponential growth. Is that once we added this digital channel for the rural banks, I mean, they could have an exponential growth. I mean, because tomorrow, instead of setting up, it's much harder to scale a physical branch network rather than by adding just adding an Android and iOS downloadable app. Overnight you can double your downloads overnight, right? By simply launching an app. So I think that's that would be the consequence, of solving the digital inclusion and digital challenge for the community-based financial institutions.
Wow. I like this one. What's really happening here is that I'm seeing all the different opportunities that is emerging because of because of how you think about Pearl Pay. Can I also ask, what are the other I mean, from your perspective, you're seeing a lot of things going on from the ecosystem of Pearl Pay, and from financial inclusion perspective. What are still the other opportunities that entrepreneurs, whether tech or non-tech or finance entrepreneurs, can still play in that ecosystem where they don't necessarily compete with you, but they can collaborate with you to
Yeah.
help grow the environment?
Okay, so this one is an interesting use case. So as early as 2018, if you're familiar with the open finance or open banking framework, it's a buzzword. But for us, we need to focus on solving the digital inclusion first of the rural banks because that's our primary target market. But eventually, open finance is going to be ubiquitous. So interesting hypothetical use case would be what's happening on the ground. 35% of the loan portfolio across all the banks, rural banks, commercial, universal banks, is salary loans, right? What's happening on the ground, if, for example, I'm a BPO employee, and there will come to a point that I would need a salary loan. And what's happening on the ground is, as a consumer, as a customer, I would visit the website of the big banks and try to, submit, compile my requirements for loan application and get a loan approval and select the loan that has the best interest rates, right? The lowest interest rates. So that's what's normally happening on the ground. Now, there's a lot of friction because I need to contact my HR, get my SSS, PhilHealth, ID, certificate of registration, ITR, etc. Right? And then need to submit it, compile it, fill up an application form, submit it. A lot of friction. And the banks would have to authenticate whether these are, the integrity of the payslip. Is it authentic payslip issued by the company, right? Is it, are you the real person? So there's a lot of friction. So under the open banking, as of today, we provide the core banking solution to the rural banks. In principle, we are already a custodian of data. So all of, it's as we are being regulated by BSP, all of the information, we hold it as a custodian of data on behalf of our partner rural banks. Now, under the open banking framework, a hypothetical use case would be, imagine we partnered with an HRIS, Human Resource Information System. I would mention, I would like to talk to this startup, for example, Sprout. Sprout, what kind of data do they have? It's employee data. What kind of data are those? Your rank, your payslip, your certificate of registration, your ITR, right? Which are the requirements for loan application? So under the open banking framework, we can become an AISP, Application Information Service Provider. What does it mean? We can publish API, right? So the API endpoints, the information needed to apply for a loan, first name, last name, address, the requirements, right? Publish it as an API. Hey, you know what, startup, you can consume our API, and then all of the employees, there will be a link. For example, apply for a loan. When you click it, when an employee logs in, right, and time out, there will be a link. Hey, you know what, I could use this. And then instead of manually preparing the loan application, I can just simply select, which bank I want to apply. For example, the top 3 banks, and then the open banking subscribes to the principle that the consumer, the user, owns the data. So it must be consent driven. So I'm giving permission. I will be giving permission that, okay, I'm now submitting my certificate. Just a checkbox. So my certificate of employment, my payslip, my ITR, because these are the requirements to get a loan approval from these banks. Now, once it's at just at the tip of your fingertips. Now, once submitted, with my consent, agree to the terms and conditions, we simply refer it to the selected banks and let the banks, review it. And what's in it for the banks is that they can trust the source of data that it is unaltered because it came from Sprout system, direct from the database that, it will be, there's an integrity on the data itself. So faster review and then get back, and they know that they are competing with other banks. So they would have to be competitive on the loan interest rate. And what's in it for me? I would simply choose who has the best offer in terms of interest rates. That's one. That's one. And what we're, this is the fundamental role of technology, at least, in the in how the technology affects people's lives, is that it increases the exponentially increases discoverability, right? So through data, integration, I think there will be a lot of things that will happen, especially on that space. And yeah, we are looking forward to that situation and to that event, and a lot of opportunities will be definitely open up in the coming, if not months, years, no. So yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. And lastly, Spark, you've been through banking, you've been through three startups, you've had your highs and lows, you've won an international competition, you're seeing a bright future ahead of for Pearl Pay. Can you share with us maybe just three most important life lessons for entrepreneurs moving forward?
Yeah. Okay. So I think number one is actually there should be passion. Without passion, um, I mean it's on a logical standpoint. To work 16, 18 hours a day. It's illogical actually. So I think
Yep, yep.
passion has to be there. Right? That's number one. Then number two is actually keeps on learning. I think that's very important. So for me, the way I learn new things is that reading books, lots of books. And three, actually, probably grind. I think without, I mean, you could have all the talent and skills, but without grind, I think no. But I mean, it's so hard. It's so difficult actually being an entrepreneur. So those are the three, things that I top of mind, top of mind.
Well, thanks so much, Sparky. I know it's been such a quite a journey for you to get to Pearl Pay here right now. And just in case people want, if there are rural banks, microfinancing institutions, cooperatives that want to get in touch with Pearl Pay to see if they can use your solution for their own institutions, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, visit our website www.pearlpay.com, and you can connect with our customer acquisition team, and we'll be more than happy to assist community-based financial institutions and help you with your digital transformation.
Fantastic. And Spark, I just want to read to you one of the comments which just came out in the chat box from Kat JC Marfa. Wow, listening to this is very inspiring. Passion, reading lots of books, and the grind. And I tell you, Kat, I was inspired just as much. I've been lax with my reading for the past couple of days because I'm on the grind all the time. But I guess, if you're not there sharpening the saw, if you're not reading out there, actually, it's one of the reasons I do this show because it gives me a chance to actually get mentored by the people that I listen to every day, and things like the CEO summit where we met. It's sometimes it's great learning to be gotten from people who've actually gone through the problems and figured out the solutions. Another great comment coming up again here. P.O. William Sagarino Lumangsad. I've always dreamed of having my own business. Listening to you enlightens my mind. Thank you. Spark, thank you so much for enlightening the people listening here to the show right now. Again, for those listening right now, the RJ Ledesma podcast every Tuesday and Thursdays here at 7 p.m. At the same time, please check out the RJ Ledesma podcast on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. Again, Spark, thanks so much. Have a great week ahead, great weekend ahead, rather. And we will see you guys after Holy Week for the next RJ Ledesma podcast. Bye, guys. Have a great weekend. Thanks so much.